Senior analyst Krixvar had spent 40 standard cycles studying the financial systems of newly contacted species. The Volanthi used simple mineral exchanges. The Droth traded in genetic modifications. Even the mysterious Kethrani dealt only in temporal credits, which took his team just 3 cycles to fully understand. Nothing in the known galaxy had prepared him for what the humans called their financial market. The Galactic Banking Consortium headquarters floated in neutral space, a massive station shaped like a perfect sphere. Inside its most secure analysis chamber, 17 of the best financial minds from 12 different species sat in complete silence. They had been sitting this way for almost an hour now. On the holographic display before them, a single document rotated slowly. It was a human financial instrument called a collateralized debt obligation. Perhaps, said junior analyst Methta, her voice barely above a whisper, we should start from the beginning again. Krixvar rubbed his primary eyes with his upper tentacles. They had already started from the beginning 14 times. Each time they ended up at the same point of complete confusion. The humans had taken debt, which was simple enough to understand. Then they had bundled that debt together, which was slightly unusual, but still logical. But then they had somehow turned that bundled debt into a new product, sold parts of that product to different buyers, used those sales to create more products, and then created insurance policies against those products failing, which they then also sold as separate products. The mathematics do not make sense, complained Gorth, the Consortium's chief economist. He was a Thraxian, a species known throughout the galaxy for their mathematical abilities. His people had calculated the exact expansion rate of the universe to 17 decimal places. I have run this through our most advanced models. The risk assessment alone would require more computing power than we possess. That cannot be correct, Krixvar said. The humans developed these instruments with primitive silicon-based computers. Some of them were created using nothing more than mathematical formulas on paper. Gorth made a sound that translated roughly to frustrated disbelief. Then they are either far more intelligent than our assessments suggest, or they are completely insane. A young analyst named Pritha, recently assigned from the Consortium Species Integration Division, raised one of her manipulator limbs. Respected seniors, I have been studying human cultural documents. I believe the humans themselves may not fully understand these instruments. The room fell silent again. The concept was almost too strange to process. Explain, Krixvar demanded. Pritha pulled up a new set of documents on the display. They were human news reports from a period they called 2008. The reports described something called a financial crisis in which these exact instruments had caused the near collapse of the entire human economic system. According to these records, their own regulatory agencies admitted they did not comprehend the complexity of what their financial institutions had created. Several of their most prestigious analysis firms gave these instruments their highest safety ratings, only to discover they were fundamentally flawed. Their entire planetary economy nearly collapsed as a result. Methta leaned forward, her curiosity overcoming her confusion. And after this collapse, they stopped creating such instruments. Pritha made the gesture her species used to indicate negative response. No, senior analyst. They created more of them. More complex ones. They also developed entirely new categories of instruments that even their own experts struggled to evaluate. The silence in the room was now touched with something like fear. Krixvar called up a new file. It was labeled cryptocurrency and included something called non-fungible tokens. He had assigned a team of 20 analysts to study these concepts for the past 3 standard cycles. 2 of them had requested transfers to less stressful positions. One had taken early retirement. Let us move on to this category, he said, though his voice lacked confidence. Perhaps it will be simpler. It was not simpler. The basic concept of cryptocurrency was strange enough. The humans had created a form of currency that existed only as mathematical problems solved by computers. The currency had value because humans agreed it had value. There was no central authority, no physical representation, and the entire system required enormous amounts of energy to maintain. They burned the resources of their planet to create imaginary money, Gorth said slowly. And other humans pay real resources to obtain this imaginary money. And then the value of this imaginary money changes based on what certain humans say about it on their communication networks. That is correct, Pritha confirmed. And this is legal? Mostly yes. Garth made a sound that no translator could adequately convert. It seemed to express a mix of horror, confusion, and reluctant admiration. But the cryptocurrency was only the beginning. The humans had created something called DeFi, which stood for decentralized finance. This allowed humans to lend, borrow, and trade these imaginary currencies without any institutional oversight whatsoever. They could also create new imaginary currencies at will, some of which were based on humorous concepts like dogs or memes. One of their currencies was created as a joke, Pritha explained. It was explicitly stated by its creator to have no value. It then became worth billions in their standard currency. How? Mehta asked. A wealthy human mentioned it favorably on a social communication platform. Krixvar felt something like despair settling into his primary consciousness. His species had developed mathematics that could predict stellar evolution. They had created economic models that successfully managed resources across 3 star systems. But this human financial system seemed to operate on principles that were fundamentally unknowable. He moved to the next file. Derivatives markets. This section caused Garth to actually leave the room for a short period. When he returned, he reported that he had needed to recalibrate his mathematical processing organs. Derivatives were financial products whose value was based on the value of something else. This was a concept the Consortium understood, but the humans had taken it to extremes that defied explanation. They had derivatives based on weather patterns, derivatives based on the performance of derivatives, derivatives that predicted the failure of other derivatives. The total value of human derivative markets exceeded the total value of everything the humans actually produced or owned by a factor of more than 10. This means, Gorth said carefully, that they have created 10 times more imaginary value than they have real value. And they trade this imaginary value as if it were real. And it works? Mehta asked. Mostly. Sometimes it collapses and destroys their economies. Then they rebuild it and make it larger. The Consortium took a break for metabolic restoration. When they returned, Krixvar noticed that 3 of the junior analysts had not come back. He could not blame them. They spent the next portion of the session examining something called options trading. The basic concept was that humans bought the right to purchase or sell something at a specific price at a specific time in the future. This was somewhat logical. But then the humans had developed something called naked options, where they sold these rights for things they did not actually own and might never own. They sell the future possibility of owning something they do not have, Pritha explained. What if they cannot acquire it? Then they fail to meet their obligation. This is called default. It happens regularly, and this does not stop them from continuing. No. They consider it an acceptable risk. The Consortium moved on to hedge funds, which were collections of human wealth managed by small groups of humans using strategies that even other humans were not allowed to know about. These funds often used massive amounts of borrowed money to multiply their positions, creating situations where they could either make enormous profits or cause widespread economic damage. One of these funds nearly collapsed the entire human bond market, Pritha reported. It was managed by humans who had won their species' highest academic prizes for economic theory. What happened to them? Their governments saved their fund using public resources. The managers continued working in the financial sector. Krixvar made a note in his personal file. Humans do not adequately punish financial failure. This may explain their willingness to take extreme risks. The final section of the day's analysis concerned something called high-frequency trading. This involved humans building computers that could execute trades in fractions of seconds, so fast that the trading was completed before the information about the trade could travel across their communication networks. They have created a system where speed is more important than judgment, Gorth observed. Their computers trade with each other millions of times per day, based on patterns that no biological mind can perceive or understand. What do they trade? Everything. Often they buy and sell the same thing thousands of times in a single day, profiting from tiny differences in price that exist for only moments. To what purpose? Profit. But they are not creating anything. They are not moving resources or providing services. They are simply extracting small amounts of value through speed. Correct. Gorth was silent for a long moment. I am beginning to understand why their economy sometimes collapses. As the day concluded, Krixver gathered his team for final observations. The holographic display still showed the rotating image of the collateralized debt obligation they had begun with so many hours ago. They understood it no better than when they had started. Recommendations for the Consortium Council, he said. Mehta spoke first. We should delay integration of human financial systems into galactic markets for at least 50 standard cycles. Perhaps 100. Agreed, Gorth added. Their instruments are not merely complex. They are chaotic. They operate on principles that seem to intentionally obscure risk rather than measure it. Introducing these instruments to galactic markets could destabilize economic systems across multiple sectors. Prida raised a different concern. Respected seniors, I worry about the opposite possibility. Human traders are already requesting access to galactic markets. If we deny them access, they may create their own competing systems. Let them, Mehta said. Their systems will collapse eventually. They always do. Yes, Prida agreed. But before they collapse, they generate enormous wealth. Human financial institutions have resources that exceed some planetary governments. If they turn those resources toward galactic trade, even without our approval, they could significantly impact our markets. Krixver considered this. The humans had only been part of the galactic community for 12 standard cycles. In that time, they had already begun trading with 17 different species, established mining operations in 3 systems, and somehow convinced the notoriously suspicious Kethrani to accept human credit arrangements. What do we actually know about human traders? He asked. Prida pulled up a new file. They are extremely aggressive. They take risks that other species find unacceptable. They are comfortable with uncertainty and volatility. And they are remarkably creative at finding loopholes in regulatory frameworks. They sound dangerous. They are. But they are also highly successful. Their willingness to accept risk allows them to move faster than more cautious species. By the time other traders have fully analyzed the situation, humans have already acted and established positions. Gorth made an uncomfortable sound. Are you suggesting we should allow them into our markets? I am suggesting we may not have a choice. If we exclude them, they will find other ways. At least if we include them, we can attempt to regulate their behavior. The room fell silent one final time. Outside the great windows of the analysis chamber, stars burned with ancient light. Civilizations had risen and fallen among those stars. Economies had flourished and collapsed. But nothing in all that history had prepared the Galactic Banking Consortium for the simple, terrifying reality of human financial innovation. Krixver made his decision. We will recommend limited integration. Humans will be allowed access to basic galactic markets only. Their more complex instruments will be prohibited until we can develop analysis models capable of understanding them. That could take generations, Gorth protested. Yes, Krixver agreed. It probably will, but we have time. The galaxy has existed for billions of years. It can wait a little longer to understand how the humans convinced each other that imaginary dog money was worth real resources. As the session ended and the analysts filed out, Pritha lingered by the display. She was studying a new document, something called a SPAC that the humans had recently popularized. Her expression suggested she would not be sleeping well for several cycles. The Galactic Banking Consortium had studied thousands of species. They had integrated dozens of economic systems. They had never encountered anything they could not eventually understand. Until now. Somewhere in the depths of human space, financial instruments were being created that would make everything they had studied today look simple by comparison. The humans called it innovation. The consortium was beginning to suspect it might actually be something much stranger. Perhaps even the humans did not have a word for what they had created. Or perhaps they did, and that word was simply normal. And that, more than anything else, was what truly frightened Senior Analyst Krixvar as he left the chamber and began preparing for tomorrow's session on something the humans called meme stocks. The galaxy would never be the same.